Hello friends, I am Chelsea and today in this video I'll be giving you short insights of our visual pathways. Have you ever wondered how our eyes work and help us see? Our ability to see is one of the great evolutionary accomplishments of the human brain. Most of us still don't know how our visual system accomplishes this marvel of information processing. Our eyes allow us to see the world. Our vision depends on our brain as much as on our eyes. The main job of the eye is to detect the patterns of light, then work with the brain to turn these patterns into images. Let us see how our eyes actually function. The light enters our eye through cornea, which is thin and transparent layer. Then it further passes through the pupil, which is surrounded by the iris. Then the light passes through the lens, which helps focus light onto the retina of the eye. Each eye gets a slightly different view of the world. The brain binds those views and makes them into one picture. The brain also adds a lot of details to our vision. Moving further, let us take a look as to how we actually process the visual inputs via the visual pathways. What is a visual pathway? The visual pathway describes the anatomical pathway by which electrical signals generated by the retina are sent to the brain. All the information travels in form of nerve impulses that are triggered by photosensitive chemical reactions. The visual stimuli from our surroundings are processed by an intricate system of interconnecting neurons. Our visual system consists of two primary parallel pathways. The first one is the optic pathway. The second one is the pupillary light reflex pathway. Let us study about the optic pathway. As we have seen before, light enters the eye and passes through optically active components like the cornea, the pupil, the lens to reach the retina. Retina is a complex structure made up of 10 different layers, as we can see in this image. The light passes through all the layers of retina to stimulate the photoreceptor layer consisting of rods and cones which generate the action potential with help of rhodopsin. Retina helps create a rough image and sees the world upside down. The brain turns what we see right side up. The ganglion cell layer and the nerve fiber layer form the foundation of the optic nerve. The nerve fiber layer consisting two types of fibers, namely the temporal and the nasal fibers, control the nasal and the temporal part of the visual field. These fibers join together at the optic disc to form the orbital part of the optic nerve. The optic nerve emerges from the posterior pole of eye, travels to the superior orbital fissure, and it meets with the contralateral optic nerve at the optic chiasm, which is located directly behind and above the pituitary stalk in the brain. Here, more than half of the nasal fibers from the left eye decussate to join the temporal fibers of the right eye and form the optic tract. What does this mean? In this image, we can see the nasal fibers are represented by red line, whereas the temporal fibers are represented by green line. So, for example, the nasal fibers of the left eye decussate, that is, separate out, and they join the temporal fibers of the right eye and it forms the right optic tract. Similarly, the nasal fibers of the right eye separate and join the temporal fibers of the left eye to form the left optic tract. The two optic tracts pass posteriorly by axon synapses into the layers of the lateral geniculate nucleus of the diencephalon. The fibers emerging from the lateral geniculate nucleus form the optic radiation, which is fan-shaped. They are then separated into two loops and they terminate into the cuneus gyrus and the lingual gyrus of the primary visual cortex, which is shown here in the image in yellow color. This area is also known as the Brodmann area 17. Perception of sight ultimately derives from processing within these and the adjacent areas of the brain. Here is a flow sheet of the complete optic pathway. Let us now see what exactly is the pupillary light reflex pathway. It is also known as the parasympathetic innervation pathway. Our eye must frequently adjust to change in the lightening condition, which involves intact function of the parasympathetic nervous system. The pupillary light reflex allows for this adjustment. The parasympathetic system constricts the pupil to protect itself when the light intensity increases to an uncomfortable level by decreasing the amount of light entering the eye. In response to increased brightness in the visual environment, the light stimulates the retinal ganglion cells and the impulses travel through the optic nerve and then project into the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. The Edinger-Westphal nucleus relays to the ciliary ganglion via the oculomotor nerve, which is the cranial nerve 3, which then directs the constrictor pupil muscles in the iris to contract and cause the pupil to shrink. In this way, less light is permitted to reach the retina. This reflex is important not only to protect the retina from damage, but also aids in focusing light into the retina in order to create a clear image of our visual environment. Both of these pathways work and coordinate together to help us see our visual world. Thank you.